Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon session of our meeting. Again, I want to reiterate, in light of the fact that we're in testimony, we really do need silence in the audience. Sheriffs, no need to wait for my direction. If you see someone who makes an outburst, please remove them. Thank you. Next up, we have Mayor Ed Lee. Is Mr. Lee available? Good afternoon, Mr. Lee. Please take the witness stand. Would the court reporter please swear the witness?
Swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Kopp, please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Lee.
Good afternoon.
My name is Shepard Kopp, and along with David Wagner, I represent Sheriff Ross Mercury in these proceedings. Now, how did you become mayor, sir?
Objection, relevant.
Overruled.
I became mayor of San Francisco both in the capacity of being appointed in the year 2011 and then by election of the voters in November of 2011.
And prior to becoming the mayor, you were city administrator, is that correct?
Yes.
And you attended law school, correct?
Yes.
And did you practice as a lawyer for some time?
Yes, I did.
For how long?
Approximately 12 years.
Okay. Now, when was the first time you started considering the concept of official misconduct under the San Francisco Charter with relation to these proceedings?
Could you explain what you mean by consider?
Sure. Well, prior to Sheriff Mercury being charged with criminal offenses, had you ever thought about the term official misconduct as it exists in the San Francisco Charter?
Not specifically.
Okay. And do you have a written policy about what is and what is not official misconduct?
No, I do not.
And it's been argued that the mayor's decision to attempt to remove an elected official for official misconduct is purely discretionary. Do you agree with that?
I believe that it is a duty that's imposed upon me as the mayor through the charter.
Okay.
San Francisco Charter.
And but you as the mayor have the discretion to decide whether you are going to attempt to remove someone, an elected official, for official misconduct or not, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is it your position that every public official who is convicted of a criminal offense is guilty of official misconduct?
I think it is a case-by-case basis.
So you would agree with me then that merely being convicted of a crime does not constitute official misconduct?
I believe in this case it does.
Well, that's not my question. My question is, does the mere fact that an elected official has been convicted of a crime, does that in and of itself constitute official misconduct?
I believe I've answered that it's a case-by-case basis.
So there are some criminal convictions that you would not deem to be official misconduct?
Possibly.
Okay. Like what?
I don't know because I've never been confronted with this before.
Would a conviction for driving under the influence be official misconduct?
Objection. Requires speculation, partial hypothetical.
Overruled.
Potentially.
Okay. And you're aware, aren't you, that there are many members of the San Francisco Sheriff's Department that have suffered criminal convictions?
Objection. Lacks foundation.
If you know, Mr. Mayor.
I don't know.
Okay. If you knew, would that affect your opinion about whether or not criminal convictions invariably mean that's official misconduct?
Objection. Misstates prior testimony.
The misstates prior testimony objection is overruled.
Maybe.
Okay. And are you aware that former Sheriff, well, strike that. You know Mike Hennessy, right?
The former sheriff of San Francisco, Mike Hennessy, I know, yes.
Yes. And you're aware, aren't you, that he hired people to work within the Sheriff's Department that had criminal records?
I believe so.
And as a matter of fact, his third in command was a gentleman who had actually been to state prison for a manslaughter conviction. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Do you believe that in San Francisco, the determination of what is official misconduct may be governed by a different standard than other jurisdictions?
I only know of the charter that I am confronted with and the decision that I made.
Okay. Now, before you made the decision to file written charges of official misconduct against Sheriff Mercarimi, did you consult with people about that decision?
I did consult with
Okay.
people. I consulted with our city attorney.
Okay. I don't want to ask you about any conversations that would be protected by the attorney-client privilege, but can you tell me who the other people were that you consulted with?
We're going to object on the basis of the deliberative process privilege in response to this particular line of questioning to identify individuals.
I'll hear argument on it.
The deliberative process privilege exists in order to protect the decision-making process of higher policy-making officials who need the freedom to consult with the people who they deem relevant and who also need to offer to people who wish to come to them the opportunity to do so without having their names disclosed in court. There's a case directly on point, Times Mirror. It's a California Supreme Court case, and it's about whether or not the governor had to disclose the names of the people he was meeting with in his calendar, and the California Supreme Court said no, for these reasons.
Mr. Kopp?
Well, my response would be that the mayor himself has put that in issue in his declaration in which he stated at line 7 on page 2, I consulted with others. There was no need for him to put that in if it was not relevant, and so I'd consider that to be a waiver. Moreover, I'd like to ask whether or not he's had conversations with any members of the Board of Supervisors about whether or not he should file these charges, because I think that would be highly relevant evidence about whether there was an attempt to somehow influence the very body that is going to make the ultimate decision on this case.
What if we allow you to ask that question? Would that
Then I'll
suffice?
ask it.
Right, but I mean, will you withdraw your prior one?
I will.
Okay.
Mayor Lee, before you decided to file written charges of misconduct here, did you talk to any members of the Board of Supervisors about whether or not you should do so?
I did not.
Okay. Now, you wrote in your declaration that the reason why you waited to file these charges against the sheriff until the criminal process had concluded was because you didn't want to interfere with his ability as a criminal defendant to defend himself, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yet you're also claiming that when Sheriff Mercarimi's lawyer on the criminal case served a subpoena for documents, that he did something improper. Can you explain that?
With respect to the firearms issue.
No, I'm asking about the assertion by you and your attorneys that when Sheriff Mercarimi's criminal counsel served a subpoena for documents, that was harassment of a witness in a criminal case.
Objection. He's questioning Mayor Lee about attorney argument, and he's also questioning Mayor Lee on a topic to which there was a relevance objection that was sustained. If he didn't think it was relevant before, it's an improper basis for questioning now.
So your objection is relevance?
I think my objection is consistency, but the main objection is...
Okay, well, we don't want speaking objections. Just give me the objection and the basis.
Okay, well, I did that. I won't add to that.
The relevance objection is sustained.
Mary Lee, before you filed these written charges of official misconduct, did you think that it would benefit you or any of your supporters politically to have a different person in the office of Sheriff of San Francisco?
Objection, relevance.
Bias.
Overruled.
I have respected the election process for that office, and I've formed no opinion about the candidates that ran for that office or their ability to occupy it.
Okay.
If that's what your question is.
No,
I'm not so sure what your question is.
My question is, did you think it would benefit you and your political backers politically to have a different person in the office of the Sheriff of San Francisco besides Sheriff Mercarimi?
My pause is because I hadn't really thought about it.
Okay. And it's a matter of record. You did not support Sheriff Mercarimi when he ran, correct?
Relevance.
Overruled.
I don't believe I supported anyone.
Okay. Now, one of the arguments that you have made in these proceedings is that Sheriff Mercarimi cannot stay in office as sheriff because he will not be able to have effective working partnerships with other city agencies and the heads of those agencies, right?
Yes.
Objection, that actually misstates prior testimony and counsel's argument about what's in the record.
The answer is in. Overruled.
All right. Isn't it a fact, though, that in elective politics, people get elected that often have disagreements with other elected officials?
That's correct.
And sometimes you might have a bitter rival that you wind up figuring out a way to work with, right?
Possibly, yes.
In fact, when you ran for election, one of your opponents was current city attorney Dennis Herrera, right?
Yes.
And during that campaign, his campaign accused your campaign of various violations of campaign financing laws, right?
Yes.
Yet here he is representing you in these proceedings, right?
Yes.
So evidently, you and Mr. Herrera have mended whatever fences needed to be mended, right?
Perhaps.
Okay. Well, he's doing a good job for you. Now, don't you consider the possibility that whatever the differences are that currently exist between Sheriff Mercarimi and the other heads of various departments, those two could be mended?
At this time, I don't believe so.
Okay, and what do you base that on?
I've read the declarations of an expert in this field, and particularly pointed is Mr. Lansdowne and his professional opinion about law enforcement and the relationships that they must have in order to effectively carry out that work.
Okay. Did you also read the declaration provided by former Sheriff Michael Hennessy?
Yes.
And you saw therein where he said that he believes that Sheriff Mercarimi could effectively carry out his duties if allowed to remain as sheriff.
I'm aware of what he said.
Okay. Now, do you think that Mr. Lansdowne has more expertise about what it takes to be the sheriff of San Francisco than ex-Sheriff Michael Hennessy?
Objection, relevance, improper testimony by counsel, and this is beyond the scope of both Mayor Lee's declaration as well as the disclosure of what they were going to ask Mr. Lee about in their disclosure of witnesses.
I'm not sure exactly the basis of the objection. I may have lost it.
I'm sorry, that was beyond the scope?
Okay, beyond the scope, I'm inclined to overrule the beyond the scope. The sheriff could call the mayor in his case in chief in order to not require the mayor to appear twice. I think we should allow it. Moreover, I think the mayor brought it up in one of his answers, so I'll overrule the beyond the scope objection.
And unless the mayor still has it in mind, could I ask if we could have that question read back?
Sir, do you have a question in mind?
Please repeat it.
Would you like to ask it again, or do you want the court reporter to
If it
reread
can be
it?
found, could you?
now, do you think that Mr. Lansdowne has more expertise about what it takes to be the sheriff of San Francisco than ex-sheriff Michael Hennessy?
In terms of expertise, I believe they would be of equal weight
And why is that?
because they both have extensive backgrounds in law enforcement. And
Okay, well, Mr. Lansdowne has never held elective office, correct?
Objection, foundation.
Do you know, Mr. Mayor?
I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Lansdowne has never been a sheriff, correct?
Objection, foundation. And this is also a lay witness. He's here as a percipient witness, and he's being asked about expert matters and expert testimony.
Again, counsel, if we want if we want further argument on an objection, we'll ask for it. We don't want this. We don't want to take up more of the mayor's time or any witness's time than we need to. I'm going to overrule that objection.
Again, what's the question?
Well, do you know whether or not Mr. Lansdowne was ever a sheriff in any county?
I don't believe, I think your question was whether he was elected sheriff. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay. You do know that Mike Hennessy was sheriff here for 32 years, right?
Yes.
Yet you think that those two expert witnesses carry the same weight? About
Yes.
what? About.
Objection asked and answered.
Let him finish his question.
I'm sorry, was there more?
Well, I was trying to finish.
I'm sorry.
You think that those two experts carry the same weight about the qualifications and ability to perform as sheriff of San Francisco, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you needed to consider some legal issues before you decided to file these written charges of misconduct, right?
Yes.
Because, in fact, the provision allowing for removal proceedings under the San Francisco Charter has been used sparingly in the history of the city, correct?
That is correct.
And did you run across a case by the name of Mazzola versus the city and county of San Francisco?
Objection intrudes on attorney-client privilege.
I can rephrase it.
Why don't you rephrase?
Yes. Are you familiar with that case that I just mentioned?
Somewhat.
Okay. And before you decided to file the written charges, did you read the case?
Parts of it.
Okay. Did you read the part of that case that said for there to be a violation, for there to be a finding of official misconduct, there must be a violation or omission of a proscribed act committed while in office? Remember that?
Objection, foundation. And do you have a copy of the document for the witness?
Sure, I can, but I only have one.
I think the witness should be able to see the document.
May I approach, or it's underlined?
Yes, I've read it.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I have read it.
Okay. Did you consider that point of law to be important in your decision as to whether or not you should file written charges against Sheriff Mercarimi?
Objection requires a legal conclusion.
Overruled.
Yes.
And it was important, wasn't it, because the incident between the sheriff and his wife occurred before he took the oath of office and became the sheriff, correct?
Objection requires a legal conclusion. Lacks foundation.
I'm going to sustain it. I don't even follow the question.
Well,
Ask another question.
sure. Before you filed these written charges, you wanted to make sure that you had a sound legal basis for doing so, right?
Yes.
And one of the questions you wanted to determine was if somebody did something before they took the oath of office and became sheriff, whether or not they could still be removed, right?
Objection. Attorney-client privilege assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled. I don't see the calling for attorney-client privilege.
Yes.
Okay. And you knew that the incident between the sheriff and his wife had happened before he became sheriff, right?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
Mr. Mayor, do you understand the question?
It could be interpreted different ways, but I believe generally I get the gist.
Why don't you, I'm going to sustain the objection. Mr. Kopp, why don't you ask another question?
Yes. When I say the incident, I'm talking about the incident on December 31st where Sheriff Mercarimi has admitted that he grabbed his wife's arm, leaving a bruise. When I refer to that incident, do you understand what I'm referring to?
Yes, I understand that incident occurred before he took the oath of office for the sheriff. Yes.
Okay. Now, you have asserted in your written charges that Sheriff Mercarimi's conduct fell below the standards of decency, good faith, and right action that is impliedly expected of public officials, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we expect certain things of our elected officials, right?
That's generally true, yes.
Okay. And when the charter speaks of official misconduct, it doesn't say we expect a certain standard for the sheriff, a different standard for the mayor, another one for the DA, a separate one for the assessor. It just speaks in general term about official misconduct for elected officials, right?
Objection, lacks foundation, argumentative, requires a legal conclusion.
Legal conclusion is sustained.
Okay. Do you yourself believe there's a separate standard for the sheriff than for other elected officials?
Objection, irrelevant.
Overruled.
Should be the same standard.
Okay. And would you agree with me that one of the things that is expected of elected officials is for them to be honest and forthright when dealing not only with their constituents, but with other elected officials?
Mr. Kopp, I am very sorry to interrupt you, and that question will be pending. I've been instructed that we need to adjourn the proceedings for now, and we will resume when it's permissible. But the meeting is adjourned. We will notify the parties and the press when we can resume.